Welcome, please.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Stephen, how are you?
Good, yeah. Busy as hell, but good.
How do you decide what to do?
I actually asked the Prince this question.
Which prince?
Prince William.
And?
This was the one question I wanted to ask him. In a world where you can do so many things, and he said to me, which is my answer, he goes, I'm still struggling with that. And then he went on to say, I just see what captures my heart, and I follow that and invest in that. And that was my answer too, which is, I'm still struggling with that. I'm learning about time allocation and the importance of it. As there's been more demands on my time, I've realized that time is the center point of my influence. I use that analogy a lot. I mean, we've got to stay away from the Molly May situation here when I say this, but that if I view my time as these like 24 chips that I'm playing on this roulette table of life, and I have 16 when I wake up, and my job as the master of these chips is to allocate them against things that I value, that helps me be more intentional with the use of my time. And it doesn't mean, by the way, because when people hear that, they think, oh, just optimize for like success. It also means that you can place three of them on just sitting on the sofa watching Manchester United, but just being intentional with your time.
Yeah, there's a lovely saying, time enjoyed is never wasted. So, what counts as a waste of your time?
Something that was intentional. It's kind of like a waste of your money. Something where it was used out of alignment with your values unconsciously. So, if I was to sit, and also you can measure it against things like how you feel in hindsight. I know Twitter now measure regrettable time, and I think in the same way, regrettable time would be time that I was unconscious about and that wasn't allocated intentionally against what I value. So 2 chips placed on my health and fitness is not wasted time because that's something I value and I intended to do it. 2 hours spent scrolling on TikTok, which, by the way, I don't use TikTok at all, don't have it on my phone, would be considered wasted time. Because
why don't you have it on your phone?
Because the algorithm's like crack cocaine, and I just don't want to. I don't want any of that in my life.
Dangerous.
Yeah, it's not. It's designed more so than any other social network to be highly addictive, and you can see this just if you look through the lens of variation in performance of posts. I.e., if a platform can get 1,000 views and 1 million views on posts that you post next to each other, what it means is the algorithm is being vicious in how it's sorting what to show people. It's saying, show everyone that, and this is meh, so show no one that. And on TikTok, you'll all know if you TikTok, you can get 5,000 views or 5 million views on your posts. That doesn't happen. The same scope of variation doesn't happen on LinkedIn or Instagram. It means the algorithm's crack cocaine.
Right. So what should entrepreneurs be optimizing for if it's not the attention of tomorrow's generation?
What should they be optimizing for? I guess it depends on what your mission is as an entrepreneur. And this is why most questions about entrepreneurs are not good questions. They're not useful questions. And they'll send you off on a path of trying to answer something you should never have been answering. Because entrepreneurship could be, you first have to clarify the mission you're trying to achieve, but then also the core component, how you want your life to be, I think is the way of saying. Because I meet so many entrepreneurs that are running one-man band or one-woman bands, and they are exceedingly happy, and they are subjectively successful in their pursuit. And then if you meet me at 18 years old, I want to take on the world, and I want to build the biggest team in the world and sell the company. Yeah. My objective and the characteristics that led to my happiness were different. So optimization, but also my metric of success has to be different.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm asking is, you've put it sort of almost like the siren voices of, the crack cocaine of TikTok. Well, if the thing you were encouraging a generation to pay attention to was a problem deeply worth solving, then perhaps that's an excusable mass direction of attention. Whereas you've painted it as the enemy.
I agree. No, I'm just saying you've got to be, so it comes back to this point about intentionality. I don't believe that if I use TikTok, it would be in line with the values of my life, and I think I'd struggle to be intentional about the use of that time. So I just stay away from that algorithm.
Just very briefly, because we're going to open it wide open now. I've got 45 seconds to do that. You talk about intentionality. What about the role of playfulness, experimentation, noodling around with a new technology, a set of ideas, even though you know not where it may lead?
Yeah, I mean, experimentation is at the very heart of everything that I care about and do. And I think if there's one piece of advice that I'd love to land right now, it's that with the view that the world is going to accelerate in its rate of change, right? With the view, if you look at what Ray Kurzweil says, that we're going to experience 20,000 years of change in the 21st century, if you're 11 now, by the age of 60, you'll experience a year's change in 11 days. With this view that everything is accelerating, and with that, the dissonance we experience, which is the psychological feeling that change causes that sense of friction, and when things are clashing with your identity, oh my God, people are selling monkey pictures on the internet for hundreds of thousands of pounds. All of that dissonance that change is going to create. What the most important thing to both deal with the dissonance, but really to stay ahead, to capture the opportunity that exponential change creates, is to establish a culture of experimentation in you and in your team, which is, we don't know the right answer. I can tell you how every algorithm on every social media platform works today, if that's what you want to know. However, I can't tell you how it will work in 6 months, but in 6 months' time, I'll be able to tell you how it works. And that's purely because my philosophy towards building anything, including my podcast, is increase our rate of experimentation. Measure it, increase it, outfail our competition. And these aren't words. I've designed my company in such a way. I've designed my company so that people fail faster. We measure how quickly we're failing. We have a head of experimentation. The podcast has a full-time data scientist.
Yeah.
This is. If I told you that the lengths we went to experiment, you'd think I was actually batshit crazy.
It's like the opposite of resting on your laurels, really. It's just,
well, I just think
go again.
The bulldozer of innovation is increasing in its speed behind me, and there's no book. Books take years to publish. I'm not going to get my information from that. The right answers that in every walk of your life, from how you breathe to how you date to how you do marketing, are going to be discovered by those that fail the fastest. Right. And like the best example I can give you is the podcast, just to show you this as an example. While Dr. Tara was on my podcast yesterday, the episode comes out soon, I have a magic trackpad glued under the underside of the table. And as she says interesting things, I just touch it with my finger. She can't see me touching it. I'm touching it with my finger. AI is listening to what she's saying. It sends all of the interesting stuff to my team. My team then will get 100 highlights of things that I thought were interesting. That goes into A/B testing. Before the podcast comes out, we're A/B testing 90 of the things she said to understand which subject matter is most resonant for the title. I could go on and on and on. The temperature, the song that played when Tara walked in yesterday, that was intentional. Mm-hmm. And we knew from research what song would make her open up. I know that the song Double Up by Nipsey Hussle was the song to play when Israel Adesanya, the UFC champion, walked through the door, because there's 3 YouTube videos of him opening up when that song plays. Everything is experimented. And the reason why we're moving our trajectory as a podcaster in any walk of my businesses just by these tiny 1% is because of that. Our rate of experimentation exceeds all other teams.
Well, I used to work for Disney World. I thought I knew a thing or two about how to welcome people, but this is next level. Thank you. So we could go on breathing, dating, marketing. CogX, where would you like to go? Who will ask our first question? I see you here. I'm going to do it in sort of zones, if you like. Let's do right in the middle here, and then we'll go off here. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
There's been so many interesting speakers during CogX. Some of them the talks they've given were so, detailed and difficult to understand for someone who's not very technical, and others have been very general. And I think some things resonate very easily. And as a writer, podcaster, and as public speaker, how do you strike a balance between saying things that resonate with the audience and saying things which actually the points you want to bring across?
I think the sustainable and the worthy approach to take is focusing on what you care about, what you're naturally curious of. And even in writing and podcasting, it's a really good question. In fact, nobody's ever asked me this. What you end up doing is you cultivate an audience of people like you. And so once you started that cultivation, if you deviate from the thing that cultivated it, which was your curiosity, the audience are no longer going to resonate with what you're making. Joe Rogan's the best example of this. Joe Rogan doesn't care about all the things I care about in terms of marginal gains and data and all of this stuff, but he's got 15 years of compounding against him. And the thing that would make Joe Rogan fall is if he started applying a different decision framework to how he picks his guests and what he chooses to talk about. That would completely disengage his audience. So what you have to do, the only thing that you can do for 15 or 20 years, in my view, without having to guess so much, is be led by your own curiosity. And you'll cultivate a group of people that are too. And they say this in entrepreneurship and product development. They say, don't create a product and try and think about the consumer. Create for you and your best mate. Because the truth is, there's going to be a ton of people out there like you and your best mate. And you don't have to guess so much when you know the person. So when you're thinking about subject matter, what to put out there, what to write about, what to podcast about, and I tell you, it gets hard when the podcast gets bigger and everyone messages you every week telling you who you should interview and well, you should not interview this person and why did you speak to them. It's so tempting to just buckle under that pressure. I say to my team all the time, I say, we're going to make the decision on the same framework we've always made it on, which is, am I curious to have the conversation? Last week, someone asked to come on the podcast. They've got 60 million followers. I'm sure it would bang. But if I deviated from my decision-making framework, which is, do I actually want to have a conversation with them for 3 hours? Over the long term, the short term, we might do some numbers on that episode, but over the long term, we're going to change our trajectory. It's hard.
But presumably, if you just very briefly, you could choose to have conversations with people you don't want to have conversations with. They might be difficult, they might be tough, but they might get lower audiences, but they might make more of a difference in the world.
But then my platform would go, and then I won't be speaking to anybody. So the long-term approach is to be led by your curiosity and say, of course, I speak to loads of people that I completely disagree with, but I want to have the conversation and I'm curious.
Fair.
That's the easiest way to understand if my audience will like it. The audience are here because I've used this framework of am I curious up until now. Yeah. So going forward to keep them here, I'll just use the same framework.
Right, so I'm not going to get Jordan to say over here, yes, with your hand and the white shirt. There you go, if you don't mind, in that zone there. And then we'll come into the middle here. Please, quick as you can. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm from Singapore. I just want to know, like, everyone sees your entire podcast now, right, successful, but what were the key milestones you had as you were going along? And now you're 1% every day, right? And every single episode, but there must have been things that you chose that gave you 50%.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's true.
Milestones, thank you.
This is the great thing about the 1% marginal gain philosophy. So obviously I've sat with Sir David Brailsford. There's a couple of things which are really important. So I've sat with Sir David Brailsford, the performance director of the English cycling team, and everyone knows about his marginal gains philosophy, finding a way to make the water bottles a tiny bit bigger, and they made the tires a little bit more durable and all those things. He says that's great, and those things compound, but the most important thing was my team, when I became the performance director, were down and out psychologically. And by finding those 1% gains, he established something they call the progress principle, which you can feel in the air in teams and companies. In his words, we felt like we were going somewhere. His actual quote was, we felt like we were moving. And the progress principle, Harvard Business Review interviewed people in work, and they found that in 2,000 of these diaries, the best days in work where people were most motivated was when they had a feeling of progress. So they felt a sense of forward motion that made them the most engaged. What's the easiest way to get that feeling of progress? It's not the big stuff. The big stuff, the big gains are hard to find. Like finding a new platform to podcast on is a really fucking, but the small things, you can stack those up. Not only does it stack tiny improvements, it stacks psychological forward momentum in the minds of your team member, and your team members feel like we're going somewhere. And I'll tell you, looking forward, the most popular phrase in my office is the phrase 1%. We actually have a Slack channel called 1%, where everybody just throws in their potential 1%. On Fridays this week, we all sit in a circle and share our 1%. We're a culture of progress and forward motion.
Yeah, great.
Some of those things I thought were 1%. I thought changing the call to action on YouTube from like and subscribe, which is wallpaper, so your brain through habituation just completely ignores it because it's wallpaper. You've heard it so many times, brain goes, don't need to pay attention to that. 2, 69% of you that listen to this don't subscribe. Could you do me a favor? So 69%, what I'm doing there is I'm perking your brain. Very specific number, makes you think, I've got your attention. Could you do me a favor, call for reciprocity? If you've ever enjoyed this podcast, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Helps this channel more than you know. Bigger the channel, the better the guest. Offers you an incentive. 350% increase in my subscription rate.
Wow.
Had I done that from the start, the channel wouldn't have 3.29 million subscribers today. It would have 9.6 million subscribers today. 10-second change. I thought it was a 1%. It's a 350% gain. So you're impartial of the gain going in, and you find out later the return from that 1%.
Excellent example. Thank you. Cool question. Let's go.
Thank you.
Let's come. I want to go beyond the front row for a second. Just is anyone over here? Otherwise, let's come down to the front row. Thank you so much, team. Thank you. Yeah.
What advice would you give to leaders or entrepreneurs that are minorities, say women?
Yeah.
What advice would you give them in your experience? What tends to hold people back? That are not conforming to
this is so interesting.
The normal type of
Try not to get cancelled. So what I find interesting, I read about in my book about stereotype threats. If someone's doing a math test and you remind them of their ethnicity before they do the test, their performance drops. And the same with other minority groups like women. In the tests, I think it was 1996, where they remind you, just before you do the test, of your gender. You have to tick a box or then your performance dips. The researchers then did another test where they got women to assume an alias, a male name, performance maintained. So you can hopefully get to where I'm getting here. Through my life when I was 18 years old, going into those boardrooms, of course I'm black. Of course I've never done this before. I'm a university dropout that was poor and black. Of course. But the problem is sometimes the harm isn't the label. The harm is when you start to believe in the label. And it's the same with grades, why I hate grades. Me getting D's and E's in school wasn't the problem. Me thinking I was a D and moving through life with that label in my mind. I sat with a neuroscientist yesterday who's an expert on neuroplasticity. Literally will change the wiring in your brain. It will make certain neurons fire together and wire together, as she said. So what I would say is just don't focus on your strengths and why you deserve to be in those rooms and all the value you can add. And I tell you, my closing point here is the underestimation can be your biggest advantage, because in life and expectations and everything, people's estimation of you versus your impact, how you actually deliver, that gap there is impact, sorry. So reality versus estimation is impact. So when I walked in those rooms in my fake, probably stolen Primark tie at 18 years old with my curly hair and my like fake little shitty suit, and I delivered, I'm sure they didn't assume that I'd be very well spoken and I'd be very clear and concise with my mission. And this was the impact. And that's why those people invested in my companies and pulled me up. They couldn't believe it. Really? So it can be a superpower.
Yeah. I wonder if you were allowed to invent a fictional superhero, whether your marks would go up. I mean, that's also
maybe
an extreme theory. In the pink shirt, very patient. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gregory Dubus, and to be honest, I think I'm the only one who yesterday had never heard about you.
There's going to be a couple more. There's a couple more.
And I was in a restaurant with a colleague who spoke about you for half an hour. So I said, I need to come to listen to you, and I agree. You are very enlightening, what you said. You spoke about challenges, about courage, about support from others. And I've got a question. When I spoke to her for half an hour, I gave myself one challenge. I said, I'm gonna go to see him, but I'm gonna go also have a picture with him. And you know, challenge is easy, but what is the most difficult is to realize them, because you need support from others.
Yeah.
So my question is, will you accept after this Q&A to have a picture together?
Of course. Of course. Let me just
challenge accepted, right?
Let me just check something. I will have a picture with everyone who wants a picture in the room, because there's nothing really that I can't move. So I'll have a picture with everybody in the room. That one's one. I'll go stand in a corner.
Good commitment. Thank you. Thank you, Gregor. Welcome to CogX. We're going to go into this zone here. I'm going to go 1 and then 2. That's very good waving, so you get extra points. I might book you for Heathrow next week. Now, but just in the glasses here, 2 in front of you. We'll take 2 questions, and then we'll go back to Bat Boy there with his ping pong bats.
Hi, my name's Trish, and I'm a software developer. I was diagnosed with autism when I was younger, and I grew up to enable myself to socialize. I taught myself how to communicate and common social cues and how to recognize what other people are thinking. In your talk, you talked about happiness, and something I'm still trying to figure out is how to figure out what other people are feeling. So how do I know in the workplace and in society, 3 things to tell if someone's happy, and how much should I care about the people around me being happy?
Yeah, so I think it's important for you to care about yourself and the people around you being happy, whatever the word happy means. The way that you can tell, the best way to find out if they're happy is to ask them. And we don't do enough of that. We do the flippant, you right? Yeah, you, yeah. But there's ways we can ask more sort of intentional, deliberate, open questions, like how are you feeling? Is a much better thing, or is, much better question than are you okay? Which is kind of a binary, right? It's yes or no. And we don't do enough of that. And even from my podcast, there's been episodes where I remember Simon Sinek, the 3rd time he came on, I'm sure some of you would have heard it. I hope some of you heard it. And I said to him at the start of the conversation, first thing I said is, hi Simon, how are you feeling? And don't give me the short answer, give me the real one. And he paused for a second. He went, I'm feeling really lonely. And the next 2.5 hours were a conversation about loneliness. Had I asked him the question in a flippant way, and had I not presented that caveat, then he might not have told me that. But one thing I've also come to learn is it's a real honor and privilege for someone to really tell you how they're feeling. And you earn that privilege by how you've reacted in the past when they've told you how they're feeling. Something I'm guilty of is I'm a chronic fixer. So someone says there's a problem to me, I go, fuck it, and you are as well. I go, fuck it, right, I'll fix it. I'll try and think of a podcast episode where someone gave me some advice and I'll just hit them with it. But as I came to learn, sometimes people just want you to sit in the mud with them, which means they just want you to listen. And the people that do realize that and just aren't these chronic fixes and like me and sit in the mud with them, then in the future, it's going to be a much easier conversation when you say, how are you feeling? They might tell you the truth. We all have a score, an invisible score called like our we'll call it your friendship score or whatever, which is how we've dealt in moments of struggle, like our struggle score, how you've dealt with that individual in the past when they've come to you in a moment of struggle. If you want to be a great friend, listen, sit in the mud with them, don't try and fix the situation. You can ask them questions, which I've come to learn, which is there anything I can do in this moment to help you? Would you like me to offer you some advice? But I've moved away from just being the fixer. And we don't do enough of that. We don't check in with each other.
Thank you.
Cracking question. Thank you. Brilliant answer. Thank you.
Difficult
Back
question.
to our gesticulating companion. Here we are.
How are you, Stephen? You okay?
Oh,
Scouser in the house.
Oh, yeah.
Bet you weren't
Because it
expecting
comes
that.
out of here. So
But yeah, what my question is what are your thoughts on positive solutions being impacted by negative perceptions? So if you want me to elaborate for anyone who didn't get that, I'm a student, so I've got a lot of ideas. I meet a lot of people. And then perceptions can possibly have effects on my idea. And that idea could be a really good solution. And the reason I'm asking it was because I was here yesterday, and that's to do with the waving, because I wanted to ask this question really bad, but you didn't let me, so I got your attention. So the question is, I was here yesterday, and there was a lot of speakers, really influential people, really great people. And when I come, I wasn't expecting them to be so against AI and the future of tech, and there was so much around, like, it's going to take over the world, it's not good for us. And it contrasted a lot to what a lot of the people were doing in the room. So a lot of these people are really change makers, leaders, really taking over. And it was really interesting to understand, is perception could possibly have effects on a really good solution?
Of course it can. Of course it can. I mean, in fact, I'll give you a bit more detail on that. So this idea of like cognitive dissonance, right? Which is this psychological friction we feel when something challenges us. So you think about that. The information that smoking is bad for your health is dissonant to me smoking. So what I do when I experience that dissonance, that friction, is I'll find a way to alleviate it by justifying my smoking habit. I'll say, yes, but it helps me lose weight. Yes, but it makes me feel less stressed. We're not able as human beings to hold the dissonance, something that causes us dissonance with our existing information. So when things change the world, whether it's social media, when back in the day MTV laughed me out of the room at the thought that I told them to start a Facebook page back in the day, and they were like, we're going to go viral, and people can comment on what we say, and we have no control over that. This guy didn't let me finish the presentation. I was laughed out of the room. It's the same with the monkey JPEGs and all the blockchain technologies. Lots of bullshit going on, of course, but underlying there, the blockchain technology can change our lives in really important ways. If something didn't cause skepticism and mass critique, I wouldn't think it was that important. I've come to learn that a positive indicator that something might be changing the world is that it's pissing a group of incumbents off in some way. And so I don't want to commit my life to any sector or area where there isn't a clear group of people that are experiencing dissonance. The dissonance, which is the skepticism and the critiques, is a great fucking sign for innovation. It means that some people are feeling really challenged by this thing. And if you think through all of the evolutions in technology from the internet and Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, and now AI, it's going to cause a lot of people that dissonance. They're going to be shouting and screaming and holding onto their job with their fucking lives, right? So it's for me, it's a nice forward indicator that that's a great area to be building in, because it's disrupting people and it's challenging them.
Now, we are running down on time, but let's take another one. Stephen, feast your eyes. Where shall we go?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to...
You get in trouble. I think we go front row. You have taken two at a time? Yeah. Okay, well, why not take a pair if that's okay?
You raised your hand
here, and then
which I found compelling. Yours was like that.
Is that what you meant? Is that what you meant,
I always
Stephen?
think the people that are raised at the lowest are probably... Everyone's like...
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So, yeah, I'm Tracy. Nice to meet you. I've got a question that's relating to what you've just spoken about in the arena.
Yeah.
And this is about managing people in a fast growth business. So, tips and tricks and advice for C-suite that need to go for extreme productivity, for fast growth, but they also need to deal with the extreme stress of their workforce. What would you say you've heard and seen and have applied that has worked that you would give to your portcos and everyone here?
Do you want to go straight on that, or do you want to take another one as well?
I'll answer this one because I'll forget. My memory is like I would say like a goldfish, but they just did the studies, and goldfish now have better memories than us. But so 2 parts of the question. The first was around like how do you get teams to innovate quickly, and then how do you deal with the stress? First part on the innovation part is teams smaller, remove all the bureaucracy, change the incentive structures, and reward the fact that they carried out the experiment, and do not reward or do not penalize what happened in the experiment, because we can't predict that part. So if you get into a culture where you're chastising people, penalizing people for how an experiment was ran or something that they did, they're much less likely to perform the behavior. We celebrate the fact we ran the experiment, regardless of the outcome. Small teams, I like teams of 4 maximum, because then we don't have to wait for Dave to get back from annual leave, which I got a whole story about that. Which nearly, if we put 15 people on an email chain, sent them an idea, 6 months later, still mulling around waiting for someone to get back from annual leave. The idea nearly died on the email chain. I took it on the weekend, put it on Fiverr and Upwork, ran it with a freelancer overseas, changed our fucking business for 3 years. It nearly died on that email chain. And I got so pissed off with that. And I thought, fuck, that's my fault. 15 people you sent it to. 4 people, deadlines, super empowered to make decisions, and then continually reward them for the input, not the output. And you look at companies, CEOs will leave here today and they'll say to their employees, everybody, right, spoke to the guy on stage, the podcast, the guy, can't remember his name. They'll say, innovate, conduct more experiments, fail more, okay? And they'll write it on the wall, they'll put it in the handbook and all that stuff. But when you look at the incentives in the organization, everyone is incentivized to do their job. And people will move in line with their incentives. Yeah. So it's irresponsible and it's super naive as a CEO just to tell people to do something. Look at the incentive structure. Like, this is why we promote people in our company. When I promote Grace Andrews, I wrote how much she fails as a positive thing. And then also, you don't have one company culture. How many managers you have will determine how many company cultures you have. If we have 100 people in our office, we have 30 company cultures because we have 30 managers. So you need to put the people at the top of the organization that embody the values, and then fire all the people that don't. Ask yourself this question. This is a thought experiment for all of you, because some of you are giggling because you're thinking about Emma in the office, who is a problem. Listen, ask yourself this question. Think about any member of your team and ask yourself this question. If everybody in the team represented their cultural values, I'm not saying lived experience, we want diversity, cultural values, innovation, mindset, would the overall average, if everyone was like them, would the overall average be raised, maintained, or lowered? These are my 3 bars for firing and promoting people. Would the average be raised, maintained, or lowered? There's some people in your company where if everyone was like them from a cultural standpoint, you would be in the bin. You'd be bankrupt. And then there's some people in your business that if everyone was like them from a cultural values perspective, your company would be taking on the world. Hire through that framework. Ask yourself the question. I said it to Michael, who's here today, when he sent me Cozy. As I said, does she raise the bar, maintain the bar, or lower the bar? Hire through that framework, fire through that framework. And the stress thing, just because I've got no time left, the stress thing, honestly, the most unobvious thing you can do to deal with stress is to focus on community. Because as I said, stress is experienced completely differently when we experience it with people close to us that we like. So taking my team to Fred again on this last week, and then them doing the meditation session to get out of work, all of the out of work stuff means that when shit hits the fan in the office, those bonds and the connections we formed mean the stress is experienced in a different way.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, thank you. Now, Steven, I have a personal question. Will you help answer our final guest question, but face-to-face? Because, thanks to the magic production of CogX, we have been beaten by the clock, but your question will not go unanswered, I can promise you. A massive thank you to everyone who has asked a question. Sorry that we didn't have time to get even more, but the biggest thank you of all for a absolute tour de force, rocking through quite a range there. Steven Bartlett,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Oli.